Good day, welcome. My guest in studio for this episode of Newsmakers is Dennis Beggs, who has the distinction of running 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 different continents. Wow. Dennis, welcome.
Thank you, Rich, for having me here.
There's very few people in Janesville, Wisconsin, let alone in Rock County or the state of Wisconsin, that can lay into that with a claim to fame that they've done the 777. You have done the 777. That's amazing.
It's a lot of work.
Let me start at, the first obvious question to me is, what makes someone want to run 7 races in 7 different continents over the course of 7 days? That's 180 plus miles that you're running, and that's after traveling thousands of miles to get there. What drives you to do that?
So I think I did the math on the mileage, and it was 39,700 and some odd miles we flew, and I think we were in the air 69 hours and 184.2 miles. So you didn't have much time for rest. Mm-hmm. One of the things when I look at it, I was a late bloomer as far as a runner. I started running at 55, 8 years ago now. And, I just ran on my own. Started out, ran a quarter mile, and I thought, I'm done. Can't do this anymore. And so I'm Irish, so I'm bullheaded enough. I stuck around, and I thought, so I went to town, I bought a pair of running shoes, and what I thought was a good pair at Shopko. And so I ran a mile, and then the next week I ran 2 miles and 3 miles, and then I just got into where I really enjoyed it. I was relaxed. I never took a phone, never had wasn't on Strava, no watch, no nothing. Mm-hmm. It was just that tranquil peace of mind, and then, it was thought process, and you could listen to your body and stuff. And then I kind of branched out a little bit. Some people started to see me run a lot, and they started to ask me to join some running groups. I'm like, oh, I'm not that good. I'm not that good. Mm-hmm. So I think the first race I ran was up in Milton at the 4th of July.
Okay.
I remember it was hot. And so then I ran there, and that went well. And then so they said, hey, you can run a marathon. I'm like, I had no clue.
Well, and a marathon is 26.2
miles.
2 miles. That's quite a distance. What's considered an average time versus what's considered a world record time?
For average time for males is 4 hours. Average time for females is 4 hours and 20 minutes. And you got a lot of people from Kenya. I got Kenyan friends, and they're hunting for that sub 2. They're anywhere from 2:05 to 2:15. So you'll see it. And then the professional women are right there. They're at 2:15. And I was at both times when Kipchoge broke the record in Berlin, and then when Calvin Kipton broke the record in Chicago. About the same mileage I was at and stuff, but that's epic and historic in itself.
Just to be part of the marathon club is a feat in and of itself. For the first 55 years of your life, you weren't a runner.
I wasn't athletic at all.
You weren't athletic at all. What did you do to keep your sanity in that first 55 years?
Well, I worked in corporate America for 30 years, and then I'm a third-generation farmer. So I grew up on the farm, then I ended up taking over the farm, and I got a beef business on the farm. I do Beggs Fat Bottom Farms. I got a certified Angus beef farm where I sell to a lot of restaurants, both locally and in Chicago and Milwaukee area, Beloit, Janesville, and then I got about 150 online customers. So I was busy. I was wired to work. Mm-hmm. So I was putting in about 120 hours a week. Well, when I retired, I had a big gap of time. And then I started running right away. I did some biking, hiking, and kind of felt out a few different things to do, but I needed...
So you retired at a relatively young age from the corporate world.
Yep.
And you decided, I want to devote my time full-time to farming, something that you'd been doing third generation. You've got an amazing Angus cattle herd that you still manage, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
In that business, as many of my farming friends have reminded me, that's motivation sometimes in and of itself enough to get out there and run a marathon, just to get a break away from that challenge. Any truth to that?
Oh yeah, every morning starts at 3 a.m. So you gotta be fired up and ready to go. So first of all, I hit my run, get that done out of the way, and then break into, you know, my daily, you know, feeding the cattle and stuff. And then if it's spring, you know, I'm getting stuff prepared, getting the ground prepared to put in crops, putting in the crops. Right now, I was just cutting hay earlier today. And it's, you know, it's a drive, and, you know, it's a love of the land. You know, and truly a generational thing. And it was interesting when I was on that 777, people had never met a farmer before in their life.
I was going to say that it's kind of an unusual hobby or avocation for somebody who, farming's a 24/7 business.
Yes.
From my experience, you put your heart and soul in it, and you really don't have time for much else.
No, and that's why I spent a lot of time during the training cycle. I would get up at 3 days a week. I'd get up at 2 a.m. so I could get my number of miles in I had to get in. And 2 days I'd get up at 2:30, and then one day I'd get up at 3, and one day on Sunday I get slept until 4 o'clock.
So you get to sleep in once in a while, yeah.
4 a.m.
4 o'clock,
So, and getting to bed at 9, 10 every night. So you just, I made it.
What drives you? That's a huge degree of discipline to take on this challenge and to train like that. That's amazing in and of itself.
You know, I've always been a worker. You know, ever since I've been young, I've always had to work and work hard at stuff. And I never really had time to have a hobby or enjoy anything. And when I started running, you know, I started realizing how much, from a health standpoint, what it did for me, not only physically, but mentally, you know, and it helped, and you could, you know, it took time, you know, you could spend time thinking about things, because I don't have music, you know, I don't have any music or anything or phone or anything when I run, and then you process stuff. And within that, you know, and there's that drive of competitiveness, and you start feeling better. And you know, the better you do, and not, you know what, every day is not a perfect run, but you know what, you went out there, you did it, you accomplished a goal, you set a goal and you accomplished and you did it. You know, it's not, you don't have to be a 2-hour marathoner, or you can be a 6-hour marathon. All of you got something in common. You accomplished that goal of crossing that finish line at 26.2 miles. And that in itself is a huge success.
There's this concept of a runner's high. You get to a certain point in that run where you find a sense of euphoria that you can't imagine in any other form of attainment. Is there any truth to that?
On your good runs.
On your good runs, yeah.
No, I think, yeah, there is. There is a, like, I could remember in Sydney last year, you know, I was feeling that. I don't feel it every race, but there's certain races where you'll feel like you're on fire, and you get there, and it's the best feeling in the world. And you're enjoying the crowd, you're enjoying the scene, you're enjoying the people you're running next to. You know, it's just that, you know, it's an emotional high. I can remember running the most prolific marathon I ever run was the 50th New York City Marathon. When we lined up on the bridge, and it was a double-decker bridge, 18 lanes across, I think, and they had New York State patrolled, and then they had the New York City police, fire trucks, Harley people, and then they had a bunch of municipal and private vehicles, and then they had 4 Black Hawk helicopters, and they literally took us across the Verrazano Bridge, and we're shooting off fireworks on the other side. That was epic. I mean, 2.4 million people, and we're coming out of COVID. When you hit the other side of that bridge in Brooklyn, the sounds, I mean, if that wasn't enough high to lift you through the whole race, it was just, and it was that way the whole way. People just scream. Everybody had to have a name on. People are screaming your name, and it was just, you know, it's
just an incredible feeling. Something you can't really replicate.
No, but you'll remember it. I can remember it like I could remember coming down off that bridge and hitting that first curve and just seeing people lined up forever.
Wow. In the 7 or 8 years that you've been running, how many marathons have you run?
I think I'm around 72 or 73.
Okay.
I'm somewhere right in there. I'm pretty close to that.
Which one do you remember the best and the most? Is there one that stands out?
Yeah, New York City's 50th.
Okay.
That was the most epic marathon I ever ran in my life. The other one was Cape Town.
Okay.
When I ran Cape Town, We started out that morning, it was 88 degrees at 6 in the morning. We had 40-mile-an-hour winds, and we finished. I could just remember coming down to the city at another 7 miles, and the wind gusts would blow you from one side of the street to the other. And we came out of the sand dunes, and that sand would literally pierce your skin and your neck. And you could just see the heat rippling off the concrete and the buildings and the blacktop, and it was hot, but we made it through. And I could come up to I have some friends from Kenya. They're barely even sweating, and they'd finished 2 hours before I did.
Well, is there any truth to it? They live in a climate, in an environment that's almost perfect for a long distance run training. The mountains are ideal if you're going to learn to use your oxygen efficiently and effectively. And frankly, I believe it's the national sport there, isn't it?
Yeah. I've got a group of friends that are from Kenya, and Kenyans, and then I meet them at different races. But they are so regimented, and that's what they do. When they go out and train, you're right. They train in, I train in hills, they train in mountains. Yeah. And, their whole life is running. And it's like, we think of our NFL mini camps and stuff. This is just more than a mini camp. It's a way of life for those guys. Yeah. Good people.
You had to prepare rather intensely to get ready to do 7 marathons in 7 continents in 7 days. You started a year ahead or so?
Yes. Yeah, I started a year ahead and intensified about September of last year. So I was probably running typically about 50 miles a week to get ready for a marathon. So I carried that through. I stood between 50 and 60-ish most of the year. And then once September started, I did 65 miles a week. October, I did 75 miles a week. November, I did 85 miles a week. December, and then first 2 weeks of January, 2 weeks of January, I did 95 miles a week. But also, I did 10 continents, I did 10 marathons, 10 weeks, 5 continents twice. And that got me used to jet lag, nutrition, how much luggage I really needed, and then just that endurance that you needed to build and mentally prepare yourself for that. And so that was, I learned a lot from that. And one of the things that I was able to do was I took for that 777, I just shipped I just carried one little bag, and I had everything shipped to the different hotels and stuff wherever we're going to be at. So I just had exactly what I needed, so I didn't have to fight with luggage. I didn't want to deal with that.
When I was talking about pulling this interview together, it occurred to me that you had the opportunity to run in some of the most rugged landscape on Earth, and yet some of the most beautiful landscape on Earth. It's an incredible experience. In the few seconds we've got left, is there any advice that you'd give to a novice out there who wants to get into running distance?
Stick with it. You can have a bad day, a bad run day, but it's better than not running at all. You're going to have, like I said, it's a commitment, and the reward is crushing that finish line. But all you got to do is keep your nose down and grind. It's
an amazing lifestyle. Dennis Beggs, 7 marathons, 7 continents in 7 days. Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive. Thank you for your time.
We actually finished in 6 days.
In 6 days?
Yeah, we set a world record. So.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. Well, next time we get together, we'll have to ask the question, what's next for Dennis Beggs?
You should see
and we'll get there.
Coming up this fall.
Okay. We'll talk about it. That's going to wrap us up for this episode of Newsmakers. Join us every week where we take a little time to get to know people in the news just a little bit better. Again, Dennis, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me today.
We will talk again next time here on Newsmakers, something from your Rock County Civics Academy. Have a great day.